Hello and welcome to The Next Step, the podcast where we share the powerful stories of resilience, recovery, and connection with the limb loss community. I'm your host, Kevin Gray. Today we will have an incredible guest who has spent a lifetime defying expectations and pushing boundaries. Born in 1949, Tom Allred was placed for adoption before birth. Born with severely underdeveloped legs, he endured over 100 surgeries before making the life-changing decision at the age of 12 to become an above-knee amputee. That choice led to more mobility, more independence, and a life full of adventure. From riding motorcycles to driving big rigs to competing in the 1988 Paralympic Games, his journey has been nothing short of extraordinary. Now at 75, Tom dedicates his time to mentoring and inspiring others, proving that limb loss is not a limitation, but an opportunity to live life fully. Today we're going to hear about his journey, his challenges, and his mission to empower others. Hi Tom, welcome. Thanks for joining today.
Well, yes, thank you for allowing me to join. Appreciate being here.
Yeah, good. Well, listen, you have lived a very adventurous life. You were adopted at birth, so even coming into the world, it was kind of a whirlwind for you. You were born with some severe underdeveloped legs, and we're going to talk about that in a few minutes, but that led to an amputation at a very young age. So you're what, 75 now, you said?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so you've lived all your life with with amputation. So been really looking forward to talking to you, Tom, because of all your experience and how you've been so resilient through all of this, and even driving a truck and riding motorcycles and doing all kinds of crazy things. And I'm really looking forward to our discussion today. So I always like to start these discussions right from the beginning. So in your early years, Tom, you were placed up for adoption, like I said, can you tell us a little bit about that and what your foster parents were like, and what was life like when you were very young and adopted at that age?
Well, yeah, from being told so, I know that my life started with surgery within a day or two of my birth. Neither knee joint was developed, so that's what they were working on trying to figure out. Some initial assumptions were that the joint just didn't develop. We don't know whether thalidomide or some other medication was given to my mother because I was put up for adoption before I was born, and I don't have access to any of those records.
Right.
However, at 18 months old, I ended up in a foster home, and that was probably the ninth or 10th one I'd been in. I'd go to the hospital, to a foster home, to the hospital, to a different foster home.
Wow.
At 18 months, I ended up at the Allred home, and I never left there. That particular family happened to have taken in a total of 100 foster children over the years. I was number 5.
Oh, you.
Physically, there were surgeries, multiple a year sometimes. The surgery would be done, and an anticipation of a 6-week recovery or healing process, or at least getting good healing started, would be assumed. And as soon as we went into the doctor's office to remove the casts and pins that were holding things in place, it would slip right back into its original position. And sometimes, literally, the next week I was back in surgery to start that again. And, I remember them choosing to go double that time. So from 6 weeks to 12 weeks, and then 24 weeks. At one point, the casts were left on so long that, of course, my skin started to literally rot inside the cast, and the casts were removed to stop any infections and so forth and so on going on that way. Lots of challenges, lots of disappointments, but lots of hope. My mom was a real firecracker, and she always looked at the positive side of things and helped me to do that. So when I was 7 years old, the ankles and my feet started to actually deform. And so I became a bilateral BK at the age of 7.
Oh,
And
That's a young age, Tom. And you were saying
Yeah.
you had hundreds of surgeries at that be prior to that, right? Uh,
Well, by the time I was 12 years old, when I became a bilateral knee disc I had had over 100 surgeries.
wow,
Yes, sir.
that's a lot. Knowing you, like I talked to you a couple of weeks ago, and obviously you have this way of life, this positivity that you look at. How did you come to the decision to have an amputation at that young age?
Well, we were really going to do another revision. The doctor had us scheduled right after I got out of school in the spring. We went into the doctor's office and sat down, and he went over what he was going to do a little differently, why he thought that was going to make it even better. At this point, I could walk on my legs,
Okay.
but leaning on things and a little bit of support. If I was going outdoors, doing anything at all strenuous, I had to strap on the braces that, akin to the Forrest Gump movie type braces, which didn't provide much mobility. But when he got through talking to us about, show up on Wednesday at 5 o'clock, don't eat anything before, yada, 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 all those instructions, he put down his paperwork and he looked at my folks and me and he said, we've tried to avoid above knee amputation for all these years. And I'm going to tell you that Vietnam is sending home so many amputees now that that technology is ramping up and improving, and you may live a more full life as an above knee bilateral amputee because I don't think I can ever make your knees robust. That was the word he chose in that moment. And we we chose to ponder that, to literally pray about it for a while and see which decision we would make. Because obviously you can't decide and then say, well, that didn't work, let's go back.
Right.
Uh, and by August, we'd made a decision to go ahead and move forward with the bilateral knee disc articulations. One point of really interest is that it was the same surgeon from my birth forward to that point. This guy had a real interest in me and investment in me. In fact, when he thought I was still just a foster child in that home, he reached out to the Children's Service Society and asked if he could adopt me. And that's when he was informed, well, there was an arrangement made, even though I hadn't been legally adopted, but that I would remain in the Allred home.
Well, a real wanted child.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very, very, very fortunate. In answer to your original question, some of my positivity comes from the fact that my mom made sure I understood a viewpoint of how many opportunities I was being given, in spite of the challenges, that I had really a lot of people on my side to help me find success.
Oh, that's wonderful. Hey, listen, when you had your amputation, you said before to me that it kind of gave you some more freedom in life and you felt more free after you had the amputation. Can you kind of comment on that?
Well, yeah, what I was living with was knee joints that would bend about 40 to 45 degrees. That was all the bend I had. And, I was a young man with all of my friends, got to ride their bicycles.
Right.
Uh, Bending my legs wasn't going to happen. I literally learned how to ride a bicycle by pushing down on one pedal and then taking the foot off that pedal, rocking on the seat, pushing down on the other pedal one at a time, just because I wanted to participate at some level in riding a bicycle. So when my legs were amputated and the mechanics of the prosthetics allowed for me to put my foot on the pedal and keep it there all the way around the circle, that gave me amazing freedom. And I did. I bicycled 10, 12, 15 miles with my friends to go fishing, to go play golf, whatever. I really felt like an anchor had been cut off of me when
Yeah.
they removed the lower half of my legs.
Yeah, such adaptation that you're demonstrating there. So, would you say that was your biggest challenge when you started to get prosthetics, or was there another bigger challenge?
Physically, that was probably it. The component that people often don't talk about, certainly, and then sometimes don't even understand, is the psychological impact of dealing with that kind of thing. For example, at that point as a young man, I was wearing long jeans and cowboy boots once I got old enough to make that choice and figure out a way to get zippers put in so I could get them on the prosthetics and so forth and so on. I covered up the fact that I was an amputee. I really tried to hide that from everybody. And in fact, just as a funny little note, when I showed up at my 50th high school reunion, there were more than a couple of dozen people who said, "Oh God, Red, what happened? When did this happen?" Not
Wow.
realizing that I had been a double amputee when they first met me.
Wow, that's incredible. To be able to hide that from people at that young of age.
Well, everybody figured I had some hip issues or something like that because of course I obviously walked with a bit of a limp. But the bottom line is that I was up and about. I didn't use canes or crutches. Once I got through rehabbing from that surgery, I really just took off and began living life. My mom told me, "Don't ever let me hear you use your legs as an excuse that you can't do something to your friends because it'll be a lie." And I don't want you to go there.
You don't lie. You talk a little bit about embracing mobility and that you've really lived a truly adventurous life. Can you just kind of describe what you mean by adventurous life? I think examples where like you drive a transport truck. What else?
Well, it's I tell people that I'm perhaps a slow learner. I forget I'm an amputee. I think of myself as putting my shoes on in the morning, just like you do, only mine are really, really tall. Um, and what that amounts to is that, as an example, when I got into college, a buddy of mine bought a Triumph 650 Bonneville from a friend of his who had spent his tuition money on the bike and now needed to liquidate that asset. And so he bought this bike cheaper than he would have otherwise. And I ended up on the back seat of that to go grab something one day rather than going getting my car out of the parking lot. And I loved that feeling. I loved being on a motorcycle. So it didn't take long before I was talking with my buddy and saying, I wish I could do this. And he said, well, a mutual friend, he pointed out that a mutual friend had a little Honda 175 CL, which is kind of a combination road dirt bike,
Right.
for sale. And he recommended that I buy that from Steve and give it a try because it was a small enough bike that I could muscle it around. If I got
Yeah.
into a bind, I could just stop it and step off it and be done. What resulted was within a couple of miles, I figured out how to shift the thing and was able to do it. In fact, that day, the day that I purchased it, I was out of town about 60 miles away from where I lived. And I rode that motorcycle those 60 miles with my then wife following in the car we had driven down and got it home and then took the shifter lever off, raised it up a little bit, and then put it back on the shaft, which was the only modification I needed to make, so that the shifter was on top of my toe when my foot was on the peg. Otherwise, instead of flexing my ankle to shift, I lifted my whole thigh and lifted, just
Yeah.
used the shifter that way and made it work. And it didn't take me about a month and a half to step up to a 350 Honda, then a 500 four-cylinder Honda, then on and on from there. I've had 17 of them altogether.
Wow. Wow. I can't even imagine that. Tom, I'll tell you, my experience on a motorcycle, I was young. I used to ride dirt bikes, but the worst time I rode a motorcycle is I was racing across the field and I jumped up on the motorcycle and the front wheel fell off.
Oh my.
Came crashing down on the forks. I never rode a bike again.
Yeah, that would do it.
But anyway, so and not just that, like I said, you drive transport trucks and no modifications to those either, right?
That's correct. Yeah, I have like I say, my mom told me, well, same time she told me not to use my legs as an excuse, she said, you will find a way to do the things you truly want to do. You'll do them differently than others do, but you
Yeah.
will find a way. It's like I became an insurance claim adjuster. And that wasn't a desk job. That was a field job. I started out as an auto damage appraiser. So I was going from body shop to body shop, looking at wrecked cars and having to get down on the ground and look underneath, see if the frame was bent, all these things. Well, all of those were challenges that a bilateral AK or knee disc artic would normally turn around and say, well, that's out of my wheelhouse. I can't do that one. I chose not to take that tact, and I figured out a way to do those things. I moved on, became a licensed insurance adjuster. Over time, there became opportunities to step into a property claim environment, which meant I needed to get up a ladder. I needed to look at a roof. Well, how the hell do you do that? And it turns out that at first I employed a couple of ladders side by side and just figured out a way to do it. Then my upper body strength is even to this day as a 75-year-old kind of amazing to other people. To me, it's just me. But I muscled myself up and down ladders with my arms. That's the way it works.
A lot of people don't recognize, like a lot of people that aren't amputees, I mean, don't recognize how much strength you actually have to have in the upper body and how much energy you burn being an amputee. And that's incredible that you're able to do that, climb ladders and be so physical, Tom.
Well, it's an interesting thing, but
Yeah.
people quite often, especially at my age now, comment, "Dang, you're in good shape. You must, spend a lot of time in the gym." And real honestly, I don't spend any time in the gym. I do have a floor routine that I do, muscle strengthening and so forth for my back. But the bottom line is that life is my workout. To get up out of a chair, my legs don't help me get out of a chair. It's all in the arms and shoulders and wrists and everything else. So I get a workout. I jokingly say I press a couple hundred pounds multiple times a day,
Yeah. Yeah.
lifting myself up out of a chair.
It's true. I mean, I've been an amputee for just about a year now, bilateral, and I was actually really surprised how much strength it takes. But people say to me, "How much do you work out?" I don't work out at all. Like I work out because when I go to check the mail, like just going down the driveway and back is a workout. Going up
Yes,
six stairs and back down is a workout. Um,
exactly.
Really hard to do. Hey, you're not very selfish either, Tom. I've learned you give back a lot. So talk to the listeners here about how you go to rehab hospitals and inspire others, and kind of give back.
Well, that was, an idea that was instilled in me, though Mom never said it specifically. I came to it naturally through what she taught me. But basically, when I started working for one particular insurance company, I had a boss who was appreciative of what I was doing, that it took extra, that I was working extra hard just to do what everybody else did to keep up, but also that I had a heart for helping other amputees or people who were struggling with mobility. And so when a physical therapist would call me and say, "Can you come over at lunchtime and visit with a patient we have here? He's hit the wall and decided he's not going to go forward." And so we would set an appointment for a day later, 2 days later, whatever we could work out. And that day, under my suit pants, I would have on a pair of running shorts. And I would let my boss know I may be a little late coming back from lunch. It wasn't but one or two of those events before he told me, "Look, take all the time you need for that kind of a lunch hour.
Okay.
I want to help you help others." So that made it available for me to be able to go, and many times I would walk in. I'd take my tie off and leave my jacket in the car, but I'd walk in, white shirt and slacks. And sit down on the elevator, the adjustable height bed that they would work with the patients. Then they would wheel the patient in his wheelchair or her wheelchair. And I'd say, "Hi, my name's Tom. Tell me your story. What's going on here?" And they would eventually get around to it. Just hurts too much and it's not worth it. I've tried really hard and I've done everything I can. And they didn't know who I was. Was I a doctor that had come in to try to, figure them out or whatever? But then I would stand up and I'd say, "Look, I'm not going to flash you. I'm wearing running shorts underneath my trousers here," but I would begin to undo my belt and drop my trousers, sit back down, take the trousers off, lay them on that work surface, then stand back up, and I would walk around the perimeter of the room, which always included one of those devices that was a ramp up one side and steps down the other side,
Right.
and come back around the room. And then I would sit down and look at him again and say, "I'm sorry, I interrupted you there. What were you telling me again?" And
Change
time
the-
and time again, it was crocodile tears down the cheeks. And now it wasn't because they were afraid or they were in pain. Those tears were, "Holy cow." I've been told by able-bodied doctors and prosthetists and physical therapists, "Look, you can do this, you'll be fine." But now here you are.
Yeah.
showing me, and maybe I really can do this, and it would like reignite the fire in them. That to me became, people would say, you ought to be on the payroll. I'd say, hell, I'd hate that job if I did it for a dollar. I
Right.
don't do it for a dollar. I love to help somebody else get that spark back. I played wheelchair basketball for a number of years, and my wheelchair was a dolly to carry my gym bag into the locker room, take off my legs, come wheeling out and play basketball, go back in, put my legs on, and then push that chair as a dolly to carry my stuff out. Now I played ball with mostly Vietnam veterans who were bilateral amputees thanks to landmines and so forth. And
Right.
I had one fellow told me, he said, Red, I wish I could do what you do. And I said, why can't you? He said, well, we've tried. And I said, well, maybe it's the prosthetist you've been working with, not to knock anybody, but why don't I introduce you to my guy? VA will pay for it. Let's see if we can get you up and walking. And he says, walking is fine. He says, that's great. I want to dance with my wife again.
Oh, well,
Well, he and I worked together. And one Saturday morning, his wife called me and she said, hey, Tom, are you busy this morning? And I said, not specifically. I mean, I got a day full of stuff I can do to stay out of trouble. What do you got in mind? She says, well, Paul would like you to come over. And so I went over to their house, and it was his surprise for me as he walked in from around their pool into the house and shook my hand standing up, and it was tears for everybody. And
yeah.
I've still got the photograph of he and I standing in his kitchen side by side. And to me, I mean, that was a mountaintop moment. That was as
Yeah.
if I just climbed Everest. I was so thrilled to have been a part of that. And it's not that I did it. He did it. He did it all on his own. But somehow or another, I became the spark plug that said, give it a try. And that just feels good.
Yeah, I talk to a lot of amputees and I hear these inspirational stories. I mean, you're an inspirational story just yourself, just knowing you and what you've been through and how adaptive you are. But I think a lot of people really appreciate that moment when you're a brand new amputee and somebody comes in and changes your mind. I know when I lost my second leg, I wanted to give up, Tom. I was devastated and sad and depressed, and nobody could talk to me. And all of a sudden, my doctor, she came in and to see me, and she said, "Why are you so down? Why are you so upset? I'm gonna teach you how to walk again." And that moment that she said that, I recognized that she works with so many amputees. And if she's telling me that, then what am I, wallowing over here and being sad about it? Why don't I get up and start working at it? So I think my point is I think a lot of people have those inspirational moments. And talking to somebody like you that's lived it really can change a lot of people's minds, of moving forward.
Well, I appreciate the fact that, like I say, a lot of people look at my circumstances, how I started out in life, and say that's a rough way to go. But the truth of the matter is, it has given me an opportunity to bring a bright spot in life, perhaps an opportunity to a lot of people, and that grows. Those people share my story, so people who have never met me were motivated by my story, and I've to me, that's a way to make something good out of something that started out pretty rocky.
Yeah, yeah. And you just said that you also played basketball a lot, and you just stood up and started to play. You also played volleyball, right? Can you?
Yeah, I was on the U.S. volleyball Paralympic volleyball team in
Yeah.
Seoul, Korea in 1988. That was the sitting volleyball team. We were on the floor with a short net.
Wow, what was that experience like?
Oh, I'll tell you what, I like to think I'm a macho guy and pretty tough, but I was bawling my eyes out when we marched into that arena as a team and formed in formation on the grounds, and all the other teams came in. The jets flew over, the doves were released, the fireworks went off.
Yeah.
I was useless for about an hour and a half.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. It must have been an incredible experience, though, to be able to say that. And you've done so much. I mean, you've lived a really wonderful life as an amputee. You actually also started to, excite people or teach people through technology, and you created the amputee nomad, is what you call it, and it's kind of documenting your journey, right? So, what's that all about?
Well, one of the things that I like to do, I've always been what I call a road warrior. My brother Wally and I used to travel a lot by car. He was a road warrior, and even when I was a youngster, just approaching driving age, somehow or another, Dad, who was a school teacher, would allow me to be out of school to go on some kind of a trip with him because he saw that it was also educational. But bottom line is that I've always enjoyed traveling, moving around. This insurance claims adjusting I did for a period of about 10 years. I decided to go into the catastrophe claims side of things. And so I would get an assignment in Florida for a hurricane and then out in California for an earthquake and so forth and so on. I was driving all over the countryside.
Right.
I love doing that kind of stuff. So then when I retired from work, moving me around like that. Didn't take too long before I decided I wanted to figure out how to get out on some cruises. Initially, I thought cruising would be dumb. As soon as I took the first one, I realized, yes, I'm a firecracker. I'm always going. I can't sit still. And people said, you'll be bored on a cruise. You'll hate it. No, there's something magical and therapeutic about being on the water for me personally.
Yeah.
So I began cruising quite a bit. And then I would run into people at an amputee support group meeting or national conference or something, and they'd say, "Well, I wish I could do that, but I can't get there. It doesn't work. There's no way for me to do that." And I thought, wait a minute, that's another area where I can show people, yes, you can, number one,
Right.
and if nothing else, it's an excuse for me to say, well, you and your wife pick a date and let's take a short cruise so you don't feel stranded. But I'm in Texas. We can drive to Galveston from where I live here in just a couple of hours, take a 3 or 4 day cruise, don't spend a whole lot of money, get out there and find out, okay, the doors aren't too narrow. Even though I use a wheelchair some of the time, they would say, I can get it in and out of the room. I can manage the bathroom. They do have some accessible ones when it's really necessary, so forth and so on. And I've helped a lot of people to understand they can get back into the world. Let's go on a train ride. You want to travel by train, go see some scenery. Let's do that. And I'm happy to help folks figure that out. Because I like to help folks, because I like to travel, and if it's an opportunity to go with them to get them inspired, that's a win for me.
Nothing stops you, Tom. It just amazes me. Listen, you lived a really full life. It's exciting and everything else. Can we just step back and tell me about what life's like now? You're retired. What's your daily routine like today?
Oh shoot, I sleep in till noon, go take a nap in the afternoon, and I'm in bed by 7:30.
Good for you. I don't believe you, but
I have 25 grandchildren and 6 great grandchildren. They're
wow.
spaced out all over the country. And so that's an opportunity for me to continue my road warrior work here. We're talking on a Monday, and a week from today, I'll be on board another cruise. Okay.
Okay.
It's an anniversary cruise the wife and I are taking. But, you go aside from that. I get up about 6, sometimes a little before. As soon as I'm out of the shower, the legs are on, and I'm busy doing something. I've recently remarried. That's what this anniversary is about. 1 year ago, right now, my wife and I were planning our wedding for a week away, and I married a woman who has a dozen horses. So now I live on acreage with horses to be fed, stalls to be mucked, 3 dogs that keep the horses in line. Well, 2 of them do. One of them's a mess. Anyway, the bottom line is that I get up in the morning early because the horses have to be fed, and it doesn't matter if it's
Yeah.
cold weather, hot weather, windy, rainy, muddy, whatever. We do that together. Uh, keeping the fences mended, keeping everything up to date, going and buying hay. Uh,
Yeah.
the morning is busy. Take a little break, have a nice lunch, and then there's stuff to do in the afternoon that has to do with the horses and so forth. Sometimes I'm holding down the fort because my wife, who is my same age, is also still working because I guess independently, we figured out if we stay busy, then we can stay busy. And
Yeah.
so, she'll jump in the truck and drive to San Antonio. We live about 30 miles away from San Antonio, Texas. She'll drive to San Antonio to help someone with their interior design work. She got her degree in interior design, and she has worked in interior design all her life. Um, so she still has clients that she chases doing that stuff for. We've got some grandkids up in Austin, so maybe we finish the horse work up as early as we can, and haul it over to Austin in an hour and a half and spend some time with family or grandkids there, lunch or birthday parties, or going to see. We've got a granddaughter that's got the lead in Shrek coming up here in a couple of weeks. We're going to go watch. Basically, helping out neighbors. One of the things that I do, I like to spend my time in nursing homes. I go sometimes in the mornings real early, serve a cup of coffee, rub a shoulder, listen to a sad story, whatever, for
Right.
folks who don't get visitors. They don't have family around that come to visit, so forth and so on. So that's an hour and a half that I like to spend doing. Maybe sometimes it's a lunchtime help with stuff like that. I help in the community and other nonprofit organizations and so forth. I can find lots of ways to stay busy. In fact, I don't know how the heck I ever worked 50 or 60 hours a week, because I'm busier than that now, just trying to do things around the neighborhood and in the community that help folks, while helping my wife keep the horses up.
Wow, that's a lot. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anniversary. That's wonderful. Horses. I can't even imagine. My sister had just maybe 5 years ago, she brought six horses. And her and my brother-in-law look after those horses, and they're not amputees or anything, but I know how much work goes into it, Tom. And to be able to do that as a bilateral amputee just blows my mind a little bit.
Well, once again, you just I figure out a way to do what somebody else would do differently. And we got a guy that we hire to come work 2 days a week, and so he does some of the heavy lifting. I mean, we're both in our mid 70s. It kind of makes sense to have that kind of help anyway. But it's like we've got three pastures that have gates that you can open or close, and let various things happen between the horses. What's going
Right.
on? When it's feeding time in the evening, those gates have to be changed as to which one's where and so forth and so on.
Yeah.
And so my wife hauls it with the feeders and the hay and the alfalfa, and I'm out there changing gates, moving horses from one spot to another, so forth and so on. I do that with a couple of canes. I don't need canes to walk, but that's some real ruddy land. That's some real ruddy ground. And if I'm trying to move a horse and he's jerking a little bit, I could end up on the ground. And it's not that I can't get up from the ground. I can get up in the middle of the field without anything to lean on. However, I'm 75 years old.
Yeah.
If I
Yeah.
if I if I break something falling, it's going to take me longer to heal than
Yeah.
it is when I was 25. And so I'm not so uh, wild and crazy as I used to be, to where I would just
Cautious.
plow through that. I'll use a couple of canes to keep myself upright and get the job done. I still get in my 8 to 10,000 paces a day, and if some of that involves a cane, I don't have any pride keeping me from protecting myself and being smart about it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You also mentioned that you have grandkids, so that's got to keep you busy as well.
Well, it does. I mean, number one, I have to start
25.
my Christmas shopping in August.
Yeah, I'll bet. I'll bet. But I bet you they climb all over you. Do any I guess they're probably used to you having prosthetics on. They used to seeing you like that. Do you ever have strangers or kids come up to you and ask you about it?
Well, yes, I do, but I kind of invite that. I met a young lady who ran a support group in San Antonio. I met her in 2013, I think. Maybe it was 2012. I just happened to be going to a nursing home in San Antonio to visit somebody for a peer visit, and I ran into a friend of mine who had been a prosthetist at a prosthetics company I used to do business with, and she was with him. They were on a mission together,
Right.
and so I got introduced, and we decided to have coffee and exchange stories. And she's an amputee. And during the conversation, she said, "Have you ever attended a support group?" And I said, "No, Mona, I don't need a support group." And she smiled at me and kind of gave me the RCA dog look and said, "But maybe they need you." And I didn't realize, I had never pictured the possible effect I could have in a group setting where I'd support more people than one person. I was active for years in doing the one-on-one with people. Well, I went to the next support group meeting that was held, showed up in my long jeans and my cowboy boots, and I hadn't ridden my motorcycle to that particular meeting, but mentioned that I rode, and a bunch of the guys that were sitting there in their shorts and their tennis shoes, looked at me and said, "Well, how the heck did you get your boots?" My process said I couldn't do that, and I thought, well, thank goodness I've got a prosthetist who has an open mind like I do, and he helped me adapt things, and so I always wore boots. Well, the thing that got me was they were all in shorts. And I'd never bought a pair of shorts in my life. As I said a little while ago, I hid the fact that I was an amputee for many, many, many years. Literally, the next meeting, I showed up in shorts and I got laughed at big time because I was so unaware of the environment I was in that I still had my cowboy boots on with
Oh
shorts.
no, really?
Yeah. I walked in and said, "Look what you guys have done to me." And they laughed and they said, "Yeah, the boots look good with it." And then the light went on. It was like, oh, that was really brilliant of me. So on the way home from that meeting, I stopped by a sports store and picked up some shoes that would work and do a
Yeah,
better job. At any rate, the bottom line is that I now wear shorts all the time.
yeah.
I don't wear shorts when I'm going to a special church meeting, though the regular meetings I do, or a funeral. Okay. Otherwise, I am always in shorts. And people will sometimes come up and say, could I ask you, could I talk to you for just a moment? Could I? And I say, yes, you may. And let me give you a clue for future reference. If you walk up to somebody and you can tell they have a prosthesis and they're wearing long pants and they're kind of looking at the ground, not making eye contact with you, they probably don't want to have a conversation about it.
Yeah,
However, if a person is running around in shorts, displaying their prostheses, and when you walk up, they're making eye contact with you, pretty good signal the conversation already started.
right. Absolutely. And, couple things that you just brought out there. I was in a pool company, like getting some pool supplies last summer. And I did the exact same thing. Like I noticed somebody else that was bilateral, and I was actually amazed because I had only lost one leg at that time and I was struggling walking and standing. I'd taken a lot of energy. I looked at this guy bilateral. He's carrying a water pump in his arms. I'm like, how does he do that? Right.
Yeah,
So, it's like, I guess what I'm trying to say too is you said that you hide it, you used to hide it and now you don't. And I talk to a lot of amputees, a lot of people on this podcast. I run for a support group myself. Um, and I would say it's like a mix. There's some people that hide it and don't want people to know, and there's other people that are proud of it. I made it and I'm surviving. So it's really interesting. I don't know what like I guess everybody has to choose themselves, but I lean towards not hiding it and letting people talk to me about it.
sure. Well,
Yeah.
one of my adventurous moves in life, this young lady that runs a support group got a hold of a bunch of us and said, "Look, I am inspired to get a group of amputees together to go climb Mount Kilimanjaro.
Oh
Are
wow.
you interested?" And I said, "Yeah, I am." Now at this point I'm 63, 64 years old, whatever. And so, I'm thinking, maybe yes, maybe no. Bottom line is that we started into a year and a half long training
Yeah.
of doing local hikes, local climbs, then to Colorado or New Mexico for some high altitude stuff, see who could tolerate that, so forth and so on. 14 of us started that process. When
Wow.
it came down to, okay, get the doctor certification and let's keep moving forward, my doctor reminded me of my medical history and some things that I'd already dealt with outside of being an amputee that had compromised my immune system. And he said, "I think it's marvelous. I think you could probably do it. And I think I'd be happy to sign off on you going. But I want you to think about the fact that you could go to South Africa and contract something that could be life-ending ultimately for you. Maybe you catch something you can't deal with. So I chose not to go. Bottom line is I chose not to make the trip. Now, I will tell you, out of the 14 of us that started that process, 9 went, 8 made the summit. That's 8 out of 9 made the summit.
That's good.
Able-bodied hikers that go climb that mountain, 40% make the summit,
Ah,
60% don't. That team, a lot of them made it because they came to the Baracco Wall. That was the end of it for somebody. They couldn't go. They locked arm in arm and together pulled each other through those hard spots that for each one of them was a challenge they could not succeed through, but they made it work. I turned around and somebody asked me about a half a year into the training saying, Allred, you're a bit old and you may or may not make that trip. What about spending all this time training and then not going? What would happen if that happened? And I said, I'll be in better shape than I would have otherwise
yeah,
been.
yeah.
I mean, there's no loss here
You always,
in having that come about that way. So it was a good experience and probably has me at the strength level I am now because I spent some time learning some new things and staying busy.
yeah. You always have this optimism about you, Tom, and it's incredible. When you said that the woman asked you if you wanted to go, I thought you were going to say, "I already did it."
No, no, I grew up in the Rocky Mountains when I came into this world. My mom was from Texas, but she had some issues at home, and they didn't know if they were going to survive a divorce and so forth and so on. And so she went to Salt Lake City to visit with her mother and spend some time there and spend a little time away from her old man and see if they could figure it out. That's when I ended up coming into the world. So I grew up in the mountains, and I did a lot of climbing and hiking and fishing. That was just part of life. So I figured out a way to do it.
Yeah, okay. Well, my biggest fear of all this is falling. And you said that, hey, you got to learn how to stand up and get back up on your feet. I have fallen once, but I had things to grab a hold of and get up. I still don't know that I can get up if I'm, out in a field or something and I fall and I have nothing to grab onto. So can you comment on that and how you learned that and how critical it is, important it is to learn that, but also what's your biggest fear yourself?
Well, basically the same thing, except I have a lot of practice in it. I
Yeah.
think that, you're familiar with the phrase getting the cart in front of the horse. I think that applies in what you just said, and that is that, you got to learn how to get back up. Truth of the matter is, you got to learn how to fall so you don't hurt yourself. And
Right.
that's an interesting thing, but that is kind of something to work through and get good at. I've fallen a lot. I have fallen a lot, times than I never expected to. I wasn't in a particularly perilous spot.
Yeah.
Stepped on a little sand on the concrete. I didn't realize it was there. The sand became a lubricant. My foot went out from under me and down I went. Okay. So um, the whole idea about, you figure out how to fall, then you figure out how to get up. My learning to do that came from being an auto damage appraiser.
Uh,
I'd go out into a muddy wrecking yard where somebody's vehicle had been towed. They didn't even know if it was going to be a total loss or it could be successfully repaired. And I would have to inspect parts of it that meant I needed to get down on one or both knees
right.
and figure out if, there was undercarriage damage. Well, those cars sitting out in the middle of a doggone salvage yard are hotter than the Dickens here in South Texas. The sun boiling down on them.
Yeah.
I couldn't lean on them to stand up.
Right.
What could I do? So out of necessity, I had to figure out how to grunt through it. And I tried lots of things that didn't work. I mean, I was out there flailing around, 15, 20 minutes trying to get back up off of the ground until I kind of refined and perfected a process that worked for me. That comes down to a lot of upper body strength. That's the way that works.
Yeah.
And then just the laws of physics. Physics was my course of study in college. So, I go back to saying, okay, yeah, this is biology, but it's physics too. And you realize that if you watch in nature animals that figure out how to get up, if you watch how a deer gets up off the ground, they're going to form a tripod. So now you're down on both knees and both hands, and you need to get up. You straighten out one leg and you don't try to have it directly behind you. You've got it out to the side behind you, then the other one to the opposite side and behind you. Now with your hands, you walk backward towards your feet, which puts your butt in the air, and you don't want anybody taking a picture or a movie of that. But
Yeah,
there you are. Now you can lean on one knee with one hand still on the ground. You
yeah,
can lean on one knee to push yourself off and get upright and stand up. And I figured that out, and it turns out that not a lot of people had figured that out. Well, I kind of thought I just did it and somebody else had probably already done it, and I wished I'd have learned from them.
yeah,
Neither here nor there. Once physical therapists learned in San Antonio that I knew how to do that, if they had a bilateral amputee that they were working with, that was one of the things they wanted me to come in and show them, and I did that. And that's, I mean, I ought to put together just a video of that and post it to my amputee nomad spot so people can see that, because it's something that even at this age, I intentionally get down on the floor and get back up to show people how to do it.
yeah. That's it. I would love to see a video because I think I need to practice that myself to get back up because I know I'm going to fall one day. I know it's going to happen. Everybody does. So
Sure.
hopefully it doesn't hurt me and too badly. Listen, we're running out a bit of time, and I just wanted to ask you one last question here, and that's what kind of advice you would give somebody that's brand new to having an amputation. What's your big line of advice to them moving forward?
Well, the most common question I get when doing a peer visit is, how long is it going to take me to get better?
Mm,
When am I going to be through with this? And it sounds like to someone who's really feeling defeated, it sounds like a cop out, what I'm going to answer, because I'm going to say there is no answer.
right.
Each individual handles it differently. In my 62, 63 years as an amputee, above the knee amputee,
Yeah.
and in my 40 plus years of really trying to help other amputees figure out what I've been able to figure out,
Yeah.
uh, I can tell you, I've seen amputees, I've seen bilateral amputees who had a traumatic bilateral amputation get up and going in less than 6 months. I've seen others who felt defeated at 18 months and moving towards 2 years and thinking, I guess I'm never going to win this battle. And then they did.
Yeah.
It is really such an individual thing. I point out to people when they say, well, I'd like to get this kind of prosthesis, or I'd like to have that equipment, or this or that or the other thing. What do you recommend? Dang, what works for me may not work for everybody.
Right.
Okay. I point out that each leg amputation, I can't speak about arms, theory, but not really, but each leg amputation is completely unique. And I say that from the viewpoint that my left leg, they were amputated at the same time by the same doctor in the same circumstance, right?
Yeah.
My left leg, a blind prosthetist could make me a prosthetic that would be comfortable and usable and work fine. My right one was a challenge to the most experienced prosthetists out there, and quite often we have to make two or three of them to get one that actually works. And that's to say, each one is individual. Even on my own body, one is different than the other to the extent that it's a heck of a challenge.
Yeah, and it's so important to get it right because if you don't get it right, you're uncomfortable all the time. The other
Sure.
thing I would say, out of what you just talked about, is it's okay to be in a wheelchair if that's what you decide to do, but it don't give up trying and just accept that. You have to put the due diligence in. You have to do the work to get there, and the quality of life is much better once you do get up on your prosthetics and start walking.
It's absolutely true. And we have to realize sometimes you just have to give yourself a break.
Right.
Sometimes I see people who are trying so freaking hard, and they're motivated by seeing somebody else. I got so many friends that are amputees, and their stories are just incredible. But I've
Yeah.
got a friend who I've met in the last 3 years who is a single leg hip dysartic,
Yeah.
who from a very young age due to cancer became a hip dysartic, and they got a prosthesis, and there was a way for them to walk and so forth and so on. And then she just said, that doesn't really work. It's in the way more than it's a blessing, and so forth and so on. She uses regular old under the arm crutches. All right.
Right.
This woman can pick up her grandchild and carry that grandchild into the other room and put it down in a cradle on
With
crutches
crutches.
because she has figured out how to trap them under her arm such that she's a tripod, and she moves so fluidly. She is so able to, it's embarrassing to call her disabled, and yet she has but one leg.
Uh, well, no, I spoke to somebody not long ago, same sort of scenario. They lost one leg, and they didn't have any rehab because they were from a very rural place. Well, they upholster cars and boats and things like that. So it's a really physical job. And this guy just rolls around. He built himself a little stool. He rolls around on that stool throughout his garage faster than most people can walk, and he's made it work.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yep. And hats off to him for doing that, and others that have fought through and know, I mean, I've watched people who have said, the prosthetic world isn't my life. It's just not going to work. That have made absolute success out of what they are doing, whether it's a wheelchair or whether it's a scooter, whatever it is, that they're still living a very full life and they're happy with what they've got. It isn't a disappointment to
Right.
them because they've managed to get around it. Just like it's not a disappointment to me not to have my legs.
Right.
I've got legs. They just, they don't get cold in the snow, or at least they don't tell me they did.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, listen, Tom, I really appreciate your time today. Your story is really inspirational, and I admire the strength and the adaptation that you've talked about and demonstrated in your life. And I really appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Well, thank you for allowing me to participate, and I will use this conversation to inspire me to get that video of getting up from the middle of the floor with no help, and
Oh, good.
I'll share that with you to share with your support group. And one of these days, I'm going to have my mind in gear and join the group. I know you sent me the
Oh,
invitation links, but I just
great.
haven't gotten there.
Yeah, we'd love to have you, and honestly, I'd get you speaking on it because you're so inspirational. And if you ever want to do that video as a video cast, like a podcast video slash video cast, let me know because we'd love to get that up there on our sites, yours and mine, and
That'd be good.
demonstrate that because I think people would really benefit from it. So thanks again, Tom.
You bet. Thank you for doing what you're doing. I appreciate being able to participate. Take care.
Tom, your stories are a testament to strength, perseverance, and the power of adapting to life's unexpected challenges. Thank you for sharing your experience, your struggles, and your triumphs with us today. I have no doubt that your journey will inspire others who are navigating their own path through limb loss. For those listening, if you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to The Next Step and share the podcast with others that might benefit from hearing it. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram for more stories from the limb loss and limb difference community. Thank you for joining us today, and remember, every step forward, no matter how big or small, is a step worth celebrating.